Welcome to All Right in Sin City, a podcast about writers and writing in the Windsor, Detroit region. Your podcasters today are
Irene Moore Davis, author, educator, and local historian.
Kim Conklin, Windsor-based writer and filmmaker.
and me, Sarah Jarvis, former bookseller, publishing rep, and literary festival chair. Michael, would you like to tell us where we are? Or tell everybody where we are?
We are at Windsor Public Library, Riverside Branch.
And you wanted to give a little shout out about Windsor's libraries.
I did because they're a big influence in my stories, my narrative arc, which includes a character named Vera Maud who worked at the Carnegie Library, downtown Windsor, on Victoria and London Street at the time, now University. And she was an employee there and still visits the library constantly and has many encounters with other librarians and positive and sort of messed up sort of ways. I won't get into it without getting into
Well, encounters with librarians are always interesting. So I'm going to introduce you properly now. Michael Januska, born and raised in Windsor. Michael Januska has worked with books his whole life, both as a bookseller and for several publishing companies. He's the author of the Border City Blues mystery series set in the Prohibition Era of Windsor, Essex. There are 3 books in this series, beginning with Riverside Drive. Stories from Januska's Prohibition Era Border City Blues novels have also won 2 consecutive Scene of the Crime short story prizes. He's also the author of The Grey Cup Century, and he now lives in Toronto. Did I get that right? There's another book coming, and we'll talk about that.
St. Luke Road is in the works. That's the 4th novel in the Border City Blues series, and I'm trying to finish that, and it just gets more and more complicated because there are so many more and more characters and plot lines going on, and I have to find a way to tie it all together and try and bring it all to some sort of fruition. And so that's the challenge now.
So they need their voices heard. We've also been chatting with Patrick Broad about his history book about the Prohibition era here in Windsor, and so much has been written about that era in this city. So you've taken the media of fiction for your approach, and yet you do so much research. Mm-hmm. What is about that process that feeds your work?
It's a bit of a rabbit hole sometimes, I have to say, but I want it to be as accurate and true to the time and the places as possible. And so I do research very heavily into where my characters live, what their names are, what their neighborhoods were like, the streets they walked in, the places they worked, the businesses. So I want it to be as true to life as possible, but at the same time, the challenge is making it's fictional. I'm telling stories, but I want it woven into something very real.
And you're even looking up things like ads and prices for things.
I do. I want to see how much, when someone went grocery shopping, what were they buying? What was available? How much was a room to rent? How much was a car to buy? All of those things. I want to know what their day-to-day life was like. So there's this Hollywood idea sometimes of what Prohibition and things like that were like, but I want to do something different. I want to show that these people had a daily life, a street life, a family life, and what it was like for them, even though they were involved in smuggling illicit booze and everything else, what it was like for them to go about their day-to-day business.
Okay. Are there any real persons, living or dead, featured in your fiction?
I'm very cautious about that. I always, when I decide on a name, I look into city directories, and I look to see if those people still have descendants in the city that I should be wary of or cautious of or respectful towards. And I'm careful about that. But there aren't any, I don't think there are any single individuals that I've picked out and isolated and put them in a storyline. If anything, sometimes there's a sort of a conglomeration, like a combination of a few characters, a few personalities, and whether it's in the police department, politics, or just in the city street life and crime, I just try to amalgamate, so I'm not really pinpointing anyone in particular.
What other media influences your work? You're a film buff, aren't you?
I am a film buff. I love film noir, and there are a number of films that have informed my writing in particular. I would have to cite movies, recent movies like Miller's Crossing, the Coen brothers. I love Miller's Crossing, and that was a big influence of mine. And I look at 40s era film noir as well, and I look at those movies, and I look at the dialogue and the speech and the setting and the tone. And I think it's about dialogue, really, for me. I like listening to the dialogue, and a lot of my scenes when I write begin with an encounter between two characters, and I would give one character a line and see how the other would respond. And I think that makes it interesting for me and engaging for me is when I don't know what's going to come next. So I put two characters in a situation on a street corner, in a movie theater, in a living room, in a bar, and I just give them one of them a line and see what's the next person going to say, what's going to happen next. Because if I don't know what's going to happen next, then I can keep writing. If I know what's going to happen next, I kind of get bored with it. So I try and keep it as engaging and dynamic as possible.
And when you were writing Riverside Drive, did you know this would be a series?
No. I had the idea that I wanted it to be, but you don't really plan things that way. I ended it. There was an end, without giving anything away. There's an ending so that you don't really know what the outcome is going to be. And I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And so I just kept writing. And even before it was published, I began writing the sequel, Maiden Lane. And I thought, okay, what's going to happen next? And again, it's back to that idea of I want to know what's going to happen next myself. It becomes interesting, becomes engaging, and I want to keep going with that. And so, no, I didn't have an idea that it was going to be a series. And so I just kept writing, and then I started writing tangential sort of side stories about characters that weren't primary characters, but were side characters or supporting characters. I only speak in cinematic terms. I'm sorry. It's my natural. And so I started writing short stories about side characters. And so they keep supporting it and bolstering it and giving it a different kind of momentum that I wasn't expecting, writing just a straight narrative, an arc like that.
So it sounds like you have more than one book on the go at a time. I mean, how does that work, keeping that all organized?
It sometimes takes a flow chart and an Excel spreadsheets, and I number everything and I keep track of everything. And I have different folders in my Word file saying, oh, snippets of this and snippets of that. And I have to keep track of this and, oh, this storyline, this storyline. There are so many threads and so many little ends that I have to keep track of. And so I have to, it's difficult to sort of manage sometimes, and it's sort of exhausting, but it's well worthwhile. And sometimes when I go back and open a file, it's like, oh, that was a pretty good idea. I should do something with that. Or that character was saying something, and I should let them speak some more or live some more. And that's some of it too, is that you want these characters to keep living. And if you've got characters that you've invested with some kind of a life and energy and vitality, you want to let them sort of keep living and follow through with that somehow.
And so do you have in your office, do you have like a scene of the crime board? Do you have big posters and photos and pictures and ideas?
I've got a cork board and some pins holding copies of notes and things. I tend to also, when I'm finishing, I tend to print things off because I'm very visual. And so what I will do is I will print off copies or snippets of an idea or a character or a bit of dialogue, and I put it on the floor and I look at it. And so I have this map on the floor in my study or in the living room. It was in the living room sometimes. And I would map it out and look at it, and I would just kind of trying to figure out where I was going with this. And so, yeah, I'm very visual, and I have to have things mapped out and just see dialogue all the time. I have to see the dialogue. I don't go as far as printing out actual scenes, like imagined scenes, but I have to print out dialogue and look at it on the floor, and I cut it apart sometimes, and I piece it together.
And so your nonfiction book, Grey Cup Century, ironically paved the way to get your fiction published. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
That was an interesting story. My first novel, Riverside Drive, was being considered by my publisher, Dundurn Press, at the time. And my editor phoned me one day and said, "Do you want to write a book about the Grey Cup?" And I said, "I don't know anything about football." And he said, "I don't either." He said, "Well, would you consider writing a book about the Grey Cup, like the history of the Grey Cup, not CFL football, but the Grey Cup?" Okay, yeah, okay. So I did that, and I pieced it together, and I did a lot of research and found myself very engaged in the subject, and did other interviews with media talking about the Grey Cup and talking about the experience of writing this book. And it was quite an experience, and I have to say, it was very rewarding in many ways, in that in the process of writing, I had to do so much research, and I found out very quickly how to research for a work of fiction or nonfiction. And I did that, and piecing it together and coming up with a narrative and building chapters. And it wasn't always just this one arc, and this tends to be the way that I write. I write in vignettes and scenes, and so each chapter became a scene or an era or an event or a game. And piecing all that together was an exercise that led to creating and finishing how I write fiction with Border City Blues, and writing vignettes and scenes and piecing things together.
Do you think you'd do that again? Write another nonfiction book like that?
It depends on the subject, and well, it could be the subject or just the sheer challenge of it. Like, how dare you even consider doing something like this? And I might say, well, you throw me the challenge, and I might try that. But I would consider nonfiction again. There are other areas of nonfiction I'm interested in, history, art history, that I might take a stab at. I don't know. But the thing is with Border City Blues is that it branches out into so much history, whether it's art history or street history or just political history or social history, that I would find a challenge in any of those subjects.
With St. Luke Road, that's your next in this series.
Yes.
Is there another project after the series, or you just kind of keep on going with this series? What's your next project?
I keep on going, depending where in this series, in Border City Blues, where the characters take me. I had always envisioned, whether it happens or not, the idea of my protagonist, Jack McCloskey, and the other protagonist going on for another decade. And I was always looking at the idea of the Border City Blues would end with the amalgamation of the cities, 1935 roughly. And so when Walkerville, Ford City, Windsor, Sandwich were amalgamated roughly about the same time, and that would kind of end there. And then it would also tie in the Ambassador Bridge, and writing about the construction of the Ambassador Bridge. I've also researched that as well, and have looked at the trials and tribulations behind the financing, the building, the propositions, and the politics behind the building of the Ambassador Bridge.
Which
so that's intriguing.
Continue today.
Yes.
Yes, they do. Would you like to set up what you're going to read to us?
I thought I would read from the first chapter, the opening passages of Prospect Avenue, for a few minutes. The opening chapter is titled "In the Soup," and it picks up right where Maiden Lane leaves off. So I've been writing these novels so that...
So this is your second in the series?
This is the third, actually. Prospect Avenue is the third, and so I try to make sure the action picks up right where the action leaves off in the previous novel. In the Soup. Thursday, August 2nd, 1923. The roadster was bouncing like a mattress at the Honeymoon Motel. McCloskey stole a quick glance at the passenger wedge between him and Shorty and saw an expressionless face lit by the dim glow of the dashboard light. While it may have been a hot, humid night, his rescue was shivering like they had just pulled him from purgatory and smelled of standing water and smoldering grass. McCloskey had to shout out over the roar of the 6 gun-ho cylinders. "Hey kid, you all right?" Nothing but dead eyes staring straight ahead at the open road. McCloskey was staring with nothing but dead eyes staring straight ahead at the open road. McCloskey was starting to think this one spoke neither the king's nor anyone else's English. Either that or he's being shy with it. He was also thinking he had seen eyes like this somewhere before, sinking in muddy trenches. With one hand on the wheel, McCloskey fixed his own eyes back on the tarmac. He had to be careful. There were no street lights in these parts, and this hour it was mostly drunks ricocheting their cars off roadhouses and the few cops still silly enough to be tailing them. McCloskey just kept dodging. His mind went back to a conversation he had overheard in a barbershop the other day, a discussion about the current pace and trend of things. He was also reflecting on how it seemed to keep falling upon him to pull the bodies out of the mire, like when he pulled his near-dead brother out of a foxhole in France. Another member of the crew, Mud Thompson, had been with him on this particular rendezvous, a trip meant to forge a new business relationship. McCloskey saw it as another opportunity for Shorty to shine. But Mud had a certain edge to him, and McCloskey wanted to make sure it stayed sharp. Between the roadhouse and the shore, he had told Mud in a few select words to be inconspicuous tonight. Mud had simply nodded and took to the road. McCloskey and Shorty were heading to Oriental House, the place before Chappelle's. It wasn't far, just a skip down the road. McCloskey was counting on someone there knowing the lingo. The joint snuck up fast, so he started with the clutch and the gears, and he smelled the metal burn. He hung a sharp right into the parking lot. Shorty and what's his name reached for anything that might keep them from spilling out the door and onto the narrow boulevard. The roadster held together and stirred up some dust before grinding to a halt in the entrance. There were only 2 other vehicles making shadows under the floodlights, their drivers probably settling their tabs right about now. Shorty climbed out first. "Jack, you got my shirt wet. My trousers, too." "Send me the bill." Apart from the shivering, the Celestial wasn't moving. With a combination of gestures and loud talk, "Come on, let's inside. There." McCloskey got him walking. Like Chappelle's, it was a big old house built with good intentions, but now found itself standing on the wrong side of the town, refashioned into an eatery and illicit drinking establishment. They made their entrance, trying to keep it low-key, but their looks and demeanor probably screamed a little too loudly. In the foyer was a lectern that must have graced a church in the previous life. An eagle was emblazoned on the front, holding a sign in its beak that said, "No reservations." McCloskey made his inquiries with a man standing behind it, a certain Frank Rhymes, he read to be the proprietor. Rhymes looked them up and down. "No," he said, answering McCloskey's opening question. "We ain't got no Chinamen here." "What do you mean you don't got any Chinese? Isn't this place called Oriental House? We're working an Oriental theme here, mister. Check the decor. We got bamboo." Rhymes gestured towards the curtain that led to the dining room, a doorway to the mysterious east. McCloskey walked over to the bamboo curtain and parted it with 2 hands. There was a waiter addressing the floor with a broom and turning chairs over onto tables. McCloskey dropped the curtain and returned to the lectern. "Let's see the menu." Rhymes gave him a card. "You got noodles?" "Of course we got noodles. It was our dinner special." "Okay then," McCloskey said, scanning the card. "We'll take some chicken lo mein to go. I think my friend here could use a hot meal."
I think he could use a towel. What, you drag him out of the river? Shorty said, as a matter of fact, just make the noodles. Hey, wait. You serving? Rhymes stopped and turned. Nah, us and Chappelle are in agreement. McCloskey grabbed both sides of the lectern. He was thinking there might be an opportunity here. This agreement sounds like it might be a bit one-sided. Rhymes shuffled and blushed. They pay me a small stipend to stay dry, he said. In exchange, I keep out of trouble. Said McCloskey. He'd get a couple of the boys to come back later and lean on Chappelle, maybe swing some lumber, but some soft pine. They'd save the oak for the next visit, the next conversation. Be right back, said Rhymes. While Rhymes and unseen Reggie put together a takeout package, the trio wore the glaze off the tile on the foyer and tried to relax. McCloskey pulled out his pocket watch, examined his dead hands, shook it, and then held it to his ear. Gotta get this thing fixed. Shorty was tapping the side of the fish tank and managed to scare a goldfish that looked big enough to be an appetizer. The stranger stood there, silent, dripping, and shivering, his arms wrapped around his shoulders in a feeble effort to warm up. Rhymes came out with the goods. 3 little white cartons. McCloskey popped one open, and his partners gathered around him. This, he said. What's this? It's what you asked for. These noodles. It looks like spaghetti. Trust me, the locals don't know any difference. McCloskey handled the cartons back. No, they wouldn't, especially not after you've dazzled them with decor. Come on, boys. Shorty hesitated, did a double take between McCloskey and Rhymes, then grabbed the Celestial's elbow and led him back out to the roadster. Where to, he said. Downtown, said McCloskey. Now. Yeah, said McCloskey. Now. You know, said Shorty, stopping suddenly. You got that thing again. McCloskey stopped. What thing? Shorty let go of the Chinese so that his hands could do some of the talking. The thing you get when you're going on about something and I'm not sure exactly where you're going with it. When I get going on something? Yeah, said Shorty. Shorty, what? Maybe not in front of the company? Jesus, Jack. The soggy stranger stood still, observing, listening. Get in, everybody, said McCloskey. Let's go.
Thanks for joining us. Look for more episodes of All Right in Sin City wherever you listen to podcasts, or check out our website, allrightinsincity.com. For information and announcements of new podcasts, sign up to our email list or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.